Onion Cycles podcast is about thought provoking, emotion evoking, action driven, step by step guidance to explore the unique, glorious, and wonderful ocean of your being. Because healing is a multi layered process of getting to know oneself. Become the self empowered empiric researcher by discovering the unique layers of your existence. With your host, Nadine Alma, welcome to the Holistic Healing Hub. Welcome to the Onion Cycles podcast. Hello, my beloved fellow healing, integrating onions. Welcome back to another episode of the Onion Cycles podcast. A warm welcome to the Holistic Healing Hub, a space where we are able to open up, to be vulnerable, and to dedicate a designated time to ourselves, to fill up our own cups, to get to know ourselves, and to become the self-empiric researcher that solves at least parts of the puzzle of the kaleidoscope of the beautiful fragments that makes up the whole of us. I welcome you to Story 35, Episode 36, Emotions and Feelings. We have talked about emotions and feelings very briefly and more generally in our episode 19, the Four Bodies series, the emotional body. So I wanted to just dive back into the emotions and feelings because they are basically the centerpiece of the bouquet of the buffet that is ourselves, because they're indicators. They point us to a certain direction. They tell us where they want us to look at. So I want to give my source for this podcast, my inspiration behind creating this podcast, which is again an Instagram account. This time it's at Ribbit FYI. I will put that in the description for you to take a look at. I like that content, or specifically the post he did about emotions, a lot. What he did was, I think, inspired by the movie Inside Out. The most recent one is Inside Out 2. I personally am a fan of that movie as well. What he did was he made a several photo post about the variety that emotions consist of. So he listed joy, sadness, fear, disgust, and anger, but he did it in a way where he actually made us aware of the multifaceted layers that are made up of these five basic emotions. Because, yes, there are only five basic emotions: joy, sadness, fear, disgust, and anger. But those emotions can have several sides to them. For example, he lists on the joy 28 different ways that you can feel joy. Or anger, I think it was 26 different kinds of anger related emotions that you can experience. And I listed them on our worksheet. For everyone new there, every episode has its own worksheet. This one is dedicated to the credo of our podcast, which is: as I think, so I feel, so I act. So in the doing, that's where the magic happens. And for that specifically, I create the worksheets so that you have all the notes of what we discussed in every episode, but also have exercises that go along the lines of action-based self-empiric research. On that worksheet, as I said, I have listed the variety of emotions that are connected to each of the five that he mentions in the post. And what I want to do in this podcast specifically is sort of discover how they are interconnected, meaning that one feeling might not necessarily be good or bad, it can be both. For example, you can be very busy, and for the one person in one experience, this is just utmost horrible. it's disgusting. It makes them angry. For the other one, it makes them joyful, it makes them spirited, and it makes them motivated, right? Or you can feel, I don't know, maybe shocked, but in a good way. Oh, I didn't expect that to happen. Or in a very bad way. Oh, I did not expect that to happen, right? So, making ourselves aware that the more we discover our own emotions and feelings, and the more we dive into them and get to know ourselves through them, because they're always indicating something, they're always putting you into a place of experiencing what is most aligned with you and what hurt you in the past and what makes you angry, where your boundaries have been violated. We discussed that briefly in the Being Human series when it was all about the wisdom of the wrathful person, that there is actually wisdom in wrath, in anger. And we sort of forget that point. So, in exploring our emotions, our feelings, we get to know ourselves, which is basically the point of this podcast, is getting to know yourself, because only then are you able to create the life you really want and follow that bliss, follow Ananda, as the Hindus, I think, call it. And with discovering what makes you feel good and going through what hurts you, what makes you anxious, what evokes fear in you, and looking at that specifically, you're able to integrate, to heal, and to become even bigger, even wholer, emanate pure wholeness, if you want. So, the questions I wanted to ask in this podcast concerning emotions and feelings are: first, is it an emotion or is it a feeling? Second, is it good or bad? And thirdly, am I the master of my sail? The first question, is it an emotion or a feeling? We trace back to the episode aforementioned, episode 19, The Emotional Body, where my source was Teal Swan's video about the emotional body integration. You should really check that out if you feel it resonates with you, because this technique that she shows you is something you can do yourself at home or with your therapist or with a friend, and really discover how strongly connected, imprinted feelings are sometimes to how we act and how we see the whole world around us. What is the difference? An emotion is a physiological state of experiencing a feeling in your body. So it's basically a neural and hormonal transmission of what a feeling does to you. Now, a feeling is a sensation-based perception and form of awareness, which exists beyond the physical body, and that is most prominent visible that in the way that something that happened to you at a certain age continues to happen to you, because what has happened there imprinted the trajectory of how you interact with the world. So it is a state that then can become a signature blueprint of your reality. So remember, we were talking about the brain and how the brain will always choose the known over the unknown, even if the known is the most uncomfortable and horrific kind of experience. The reason why the brain does that is because the profession, if you will, of the brain is to keep us safe. The unknown is the most potential danger you can ever imagine. So we'd rather go with the very much known, even if it is painful. Therefore, translating a feeling through that perception enables us to see that, all right, I choose the same pattern of boyfriend, I choose the same pattern of job where I feel insecure, where I feel insignificant, where I feel worthless, because I have to earn love, because I have imprinted the feeling that I am only worthy if I give, but I don't deserve anything back. I am maybe even lucky if I get anything back, but that doesn't happen to me. That is sort of an example. And that example is very limited. There are infinite possibilities on how that can play out in your life, right? That is the matter of action. Like, you need to sit down and look and observe the whole of your experience, or a specific emotion that reoccurs over and over again, a specific emotion that is connected to a feeling. And that feeling enables you then to trace back the root of it all. And that is why I suggested watching Teal Swan's emotional body integration video again, because that's a process that she shows us. The next question, is it good or bad? And I find myself struggling sometimes to put a judgment on it, because from my personal experience, every coin has two sides, right? So it doesn't matter how you would interpret it at the time. The holistic point of view of it is simply just telling you something about yourself, be it good or bad. Good or bad is an interpretation that humanity put on some things, and that is a spectrum. So some people adore spiders. They even think they're cute and lovely, and oh, look at those puppy eyes. And other people would just straight out prefer going over hot coals than touch a spider, or snakes, or snails, or anything other. Maybe even a noise like someone with the fingernails screeching down the chalkboard. I remember that from my youth, and that just creeps me the freaking hell out. But for others, doesn't do anything to them. So once we acknowledge that our perception is based upon our feelings that evoke then emotions, we realize that good or bad is something that most likely we don't even need to judge. We can judge it, but we don't need to judge it. Why is that? Because everything has two sides to it. In fact, not only two sides, it is a spectrum. You might go through a phase where something that happens to you is on the interpretation spectrum of being the worst situation you've ever been in, and then 3 years later you look back on that situation and realize that that was actually the best thing that could have happened, because I don't know, it maybe gotten you out of a rut. It made you do something. It made you come into action and take the reins and just realize something you wanted to do for a long time. And why this is important is because there is so much weight and attachment to the topic of emotions and feelings. There is so much weight on being joyful and happy all the time. And by the way, joy and happiness, as he lists in his Instagram post, he being ribbit.4yi, has so many different facets. It doesn't always look like jumping around and throwing petals of flowers and hugging everyone. It can also be a very concentrated form of inquisition into a topic that makes you passionate. It can look like boredom, looking into infinite landscapes and just giving yourself to your thoughts. It can look like a hike that is very active. It can look like being in the realms of your favorite book. Like, today and nowadays, a lot of weight is on the perception of what is a good feeling and what is a bad feeling. And I feel it is important to always have that bird's eye view on the topic of there is no good or bad. Initially, you might feel towards one or the other, but in fact, there is no good or bad. It all depends on you, because that leads us to the third question. Am I the master of my sail? Self-empowerment, also a word that is used so many times and can mean so many things to so many different people. But self-empowerment, all it means is that you take back the power you have within yourself. Because what we're saying is you're not broken, you don't need to heal, you need to do nothing. Everything you want to do, everything you want to be, everything you need to realize that is already within you. That is self empowerment. And the way to relearn self empowerment is what I would call healing or integrating or self exploration, self development, and all those fancy coaching vocabulary that you find while you type in self development or self growth. Now, why that is important? Because we want to be who we are. We want to live the life we want to create. And in order to do so, we first need to get to know ourselves. And to get to know ourselves, we need to put close attention to what we deem good or bad, why we do that, and how we can shift that perception by observing it from a more detached point of view. Now, very important here as well, emotions and feelings, they are not bad. They are not good. They are just there. They just are. So they point us to something, as I said and mentioned before. In asking the question, am I the master of my sail? I am not meaning to indicate that you should suppress them and that you can decide what feeling you have and what feeling you haven't. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you are very gentle, you are very kind and very compassionate with yourself. You acknowledge that in the first moment, and that first moment can be minutes, that can be hours, days, that might even have been months or years of having that same feeling, right? But in realizing that I acknowledge this feeling, I appreciate it being there. I know for some time this feeling, this blueprint, this pattern kept me safe and secure from something. I was aligned energetically with it. My mindset was aligned with that. And now I want to look at it. And now I want to go with it. I want to let it show me where I didn't look before. Because if we don't look, if we suppress, if we repress, if we ignore, it's like a wound that festers. Doesn't get away, it gets bigger. It gets at some point to I would call it challenge or hardship, because it comes out in situations where you really don't want it to come out. Personal story, I suppressed the feeling of not being good enough so much so that in an interview where I was about to lose my job, I started crying in front of my boss. And to this day, I feel sort of embarrassed to have done that, because that job was underpaid, I was undervalued, and I still was begging for him to keep me because I was so not aware that I am deserving of more. And that is what I mean. Crying in front of your boss when you full well know that you're underpaid and undervalued anyway. Now, I'm not, again, saying that you have to look at it from a bird's eye view instantly. That's not possible. We are, after all, human. The whole Being Human series, if you want to go back to that and check that out again, was about acknowledging, appreciating, even loving the fact that we are human. So, in a way, the grace in dealing with your emotions, or dealing is the wrong word, in building a relationship with your emotional body, getting to know your emotional body, is in acknowledging the fact that you are human, that you are absolutely entitled to be angry. You're not entitled to spread it or cause harm to other beings, but you are entitled to feel it. So as long as you give yourself the time, and then once you feel ready to look at it closely, then you truly become self-empowered, because then what you do is you go through the stages. You acknowledge that they're there for a reason. You appreciate and honor yourself by not rushing yourself through that process. And in the end, you realize, oh my goodness, they are my friends. They show me stuff. They indicate where I haven't looked before. And most importantly, they are there because I am human, because I have experiences to experience in this world, right? That is beautiful. And actually, I saw an interview or a podcast. It was obviously a Jay Shetty podcast. I don't remember the actress's name, but she said something very enticing. She said, if I was a soul floating up there, or if I was in the void, whatever you want to call it, but if I was this energetic being and I was up there and I was asked, do you want to go to Earth? And do you want to see mountains and rivers and jump into lakes and experience happiness and joy and laughter and friendship and also anger and wrath and humiliation and sadness? Would you want to do it? And I would say yes, wholeheartedly. Doesn't matter the hardships, the challenges, the asleepness that I went through for the majority of my life, I would say yes. And if you would say yes too, then you are on the track to really having a fulfilled life. And for a fulfilled life, we need our emotions, we need our feelings. They are our friends. And as long as we come to terms with putting in the work, being brave, being courageous, and finding out who we are, then nothing stands in the way of being the person you want to be and leading the life you want to lead. As I think, so I feel, so I act. So I encourage you to be brave. I encourage you to do it with a therapist. I heard of Better Help. That is an internet site where I have access to therapists, and they're like sort of very easy to acquire. And if you want to change because there's no rapport there between you and the therapist, it's very easy apparently. I'm not sponsored or anything, but I feel like there's so many ways out there where we are empowered to ask for help in the same breath as we take the reins or be the captain of our boat, to come back to our former metaphor, and be the master of our own sail, right? With all that said, my beloved healing integrating onions, I wish you on this journey all the very best. I hope I was able to contribute some small speck of wisdom, of epiphany, of aha moment to your journey, to your path. I bow deeply in respect to you, because I know there's nothing more challenging than exploring your own boundaries and exploring who you are and changing your life while doing that. And changing your life goes in so many levels, so many layers. It is hard work, and it is only happening mostly in our head. So on the outside, no one really sees the work you're putting in, the work you're doing, but that doesn't matter, because it's about you. It's about your life, it's about your joy, it's about your wrath, about your sadness, about your fear, about your anxiety. It's about the whole beauty that is you. And from my heart to yours, I wholeheartedly hope that you see how glorious you are and how needed your skills, your talents, your being, your existence is in this world. I love you very much, and I hope to see you next time, my beloved fellow healing onions.